Nice Games Club is on break for the next few weeks. How come? So your Nice hosts can put together a relaunch of the show, including a brand new website that will make it easier for listeners to browse and discover all the content from the entire history of the program.
In the meantime, your Nice host picked out a few favorite episodes from the last year or so for listeners to revisit, or maybe hear for the first time.
This is episode 94, Somebody's First Episode, The Language of Games, Sequels, first published on July 10th, 2018. I think the title was a joke, but it's actually a pretty good first episode for new listeners. But to be honest, the real reason I picked this one is because it has my very favorite behind-the-scenes games industry story. It's all about controller buttons.
Be nice and have a listen.
Well.
You said to start, Mark.
Yeah, I was talking to you.
Oh, let's do it. We have
Big news.
Big news.
Yeah.
2 of our games that we're working on are wishlistable on Steam.
Oh, man. What does that even mean?
I guess you can say you might purchase this one day in the future if you feel like it.
Uh-huh.
That's pretty much what...
And if it ever goes on sale, Steam will send you a ton of emails about it.
Yes.
Cool.
So look out for that next summer.
We've established bothering mechanisms. This is great.
Yes.
For which games?
Cloudbreaker and Widget Satchel.
Hey.
Yes.
And the first of those has a release date.
Yes.
Yes.
Right?
Clawbaker will be released on August 16th.
Yes.
It's a Thursday. There's going to be a party. We're not sure where yet, though.
We will let you all know when and where that will be.
We can have a party for Widget Satchel, I guess.
We should
I don't
do
know.
that.
I don't want to party it.
Yeah. Parties or something.
Well, we'll see how the Clawbreaker one goes. Maybe we'll model ourselves on that.
Yeah.
Widget Satchel also wishlistable on Steam. Both games are also will be available on itch as well, and they both have pages on itch.
Yes, we'll link to those in the description.
If you don't know what itch is, because some people don't.
Right.
It's another storefront that is more friendly to indie games by letting you decide, the creators decide how much they want to give a cut to itch as opposed to Steam, which takes a bigger cut. So.
Yeah, itch also has models for developers to do like choose your own price, and it's much more focused on being a place for free games as well.
Yeah.
So it's really friendly to indie devs to sell their sort of mid-cost titles, using a traditional model or a new one. But then also it's great for game jams, demos, experiments, and so it's also really friendly for users who want to help curate that stuff. So it's great.
We should totally do an episode on itch.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We did one on Steam. We can do one.
Yeah. So Widget Satchel will be released this year.
Yes.
But near the end of the year is what we're thinking.
That is our plan.
There's some wheels a turning on that stuff. So no date on that one yet.
Yeah.
But Clawbreaker when you hear this, it'll be less than a month.
Oh, man.
Oh, boy.
Or no, it'll be about a month. I don't know. Calendar math.
Calendar math.
What's the date again?
August 16th.
Put that in your calendars and wish list those games, folks, because we worked real hard on them.
It's true.
Steven worked on both.
I did. I want them out so you can play. Also here in Minneapolis, the Summer Games Done Quick happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that it just ended as we're recording.
It just ended last night at 3 a.m. and it was sad, but it was great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Their last run was Final Fantasy VI, or America's Final Fantasy VI, Japan's Final Fantasy III.
Sure.
Nope, it's the other way around.
Oh, yes, that's it.
Yep.
Japan. No, wait. Whatever. All the numbers. It's the one with the Magitech armor and everything that we played on the Super NES.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you say NES.
We're going to blow right by that.
I say it the correct way, actually.
But yeah, it's like...
It's the children who are wrong. Anyway.
I really like having Summer Games Done Quick up because, I just have it up on my computer while I'm working. You can hear people talking and stuff.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I mean, I'm definitely one of those casual watchers where I really am only interested in the games I'm familiar with.
Totally.
And there's maybe like 15% of the games that run are games I've played. But they're all really interesting. And I don't keep it on in the background. Like I will watch these things. Like I focus on them because the familiarity helps. And I always watch it after the fact, like on YouTube. I don't really ever watch it live, but I know it's a big part of the experience for people. With the like endlessly scrolling Twitch chat.
Yes, they've switched to a subscription model though, so like you can't chat on it unless you are subscribed to Twitch or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
a little less chaotic.
A little bit,
yeah.
It was really cool last night. Towards the end, people started organizing through donation announcements, like timestamps on the run where they would all donate $5. So like someone would be like, I'm donating this amount so that I can announce that at 6:15 we are going to all donate $5. And then when that number hit, like the thing the donation counter just started flying up.
Oh wow,
that's great.
It's so exciting.
That's nice.
Yeah, the donations all for SGDQ and AGDQ, the different charities like Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah,
it's really cool. They raised last night. The total was like 2,100,000 something.
Wow, that's a record, right? It was like 1.8 last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it might be a record for SGDQ, but it didn't beat. I don't think it beat AGDQ's record in 20.
And that's Awesome Games. That's the original version that happens in the winter.
Yes.
Somewhere else, not in Minneapolis.
Yes,
right?
And they just moved it. They made an announcement that's going to be in what's the state that's MD?
Maryland.
It's going to be in Maryland.
Which Awesome Games Done Quick?
Yeah.
Okay. Summer Games Done Quick still going to be here?
Yeah.
Okay, good, because I want to go.
Me too.
Yeah, it's funny. We say this every year, but like it's impossible to go. Like it's ostensibly a local event for us.
Yeah.
But like it doesn't feel that way at all.
Right, because it kind of just happens, and we can't.
And nobody I know ever goes.
Yeah, because you got to take work off and stuff. And it costs a lot of money to go to. Like, you don't want to go to every night. Maybe, I don't know. It's a lot of stuff, but I want to go. But it's hard. I'll figure it out one day. Next year.
Yeah. One that I really wanted to note that was really interesting was it was a Super Mario 3 race.
Did you see that one?
I watched it afterward. Yeah, there's two players playing, and they were playing the Fortress variant where you didn't have to beat all the airships. You just had to beat all the fortresses, which is where those sort of mid-level castles where the Boom Booms live.
Yeah.
And it's sort of an interesting way to play it. And that's what's really fun about these is coming up with new conditions for speedruns.
Yeah.
And so the two players were talking it out as they were playing, and it was sort of very little friendly rivalry between them. They were all within like seconds of each other for most of the way. And then one of the players died and was like, oh, and kind of like whipped his controller. Like just very lightly, like not a big deal, and then it's soft locked the other player's console.
Oh
no!
And he just put his hand. The guy who instigated it.
Yeah.
He put his head in his hands and just was like, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry."
Oh,
and
no.
and all the crowd was laughing.
Oh.
And the guy who the other one was just like, "Oh, this is hilarious!" Like, because the thing about these speedrun competitions is like no one's going for a world record,
right?
So it's in such a friendly spirit. I've never seen one of these things where anyone's gotten like emotionally distraught or taken things too seriously. And so the spirit of it was definitely live. And so he's like, no, I'll just start over, keep going. And he's just like sulking for like the 4 minutes it took the other guy to catch back up.
Oh, wow.
And then the whole time everyone's trying to convince him, no, we can keep going. And he's like, no, I ruined it.
Oh, man.
And then they finally catches up. And then now he's like, well, I don't have all the same items because I took shortcuts to catch up. So they changed the rules of the competition on the fly.
Oh my goodness.
And
That's so awesome.
And then they're going again, and it's like really riveting because he's caught back up. He sort of like gave him the sportsman starting at the same place again. And then they're on World 8 in Bowser's Final Castle. Same deal. And the same thing happens.
Oh no.
The console breaks down again. And so... And clearly there was some loose connection or some like a melted solder or something in that console. It was kind of making it susceptible. And so the player who was felt like it was his fault was just like, and like as they were getting towards the end, the player whose console had broke was behind, but the player who was ahead had just lost a power up that would have saved him like 10 seconds in the final boss. And so even though he was ahead by a couple seconds, it was really anybody's game at that point in a really interesting, riveting way. And then it just kind of broke again. And so he was so like distraught. And then everyone just convinced him, just finish it. And so he did, but like kind of like half-heartedly ended up as small Mario. Like didn't get to do any of the fun strats and it just beat the game. And then meanwhile, the other player is racing to do what's called a wrong warp, which is where you go to a World 7 and do this weird combination of things. It's totally not different from what their run was.
Yeah.
You do this weird combination of things where you actually are manipulating the memory in the console to warp directly to the end title scene or the end cutscene. And did it before the credits were finished on the other player's normal run. And it was just like... I mean, really, what you should have done is not listen to me say any of this. You should just go watch the thing.
We'll link.
It's super interesting.
We'll link to that.
Yeah. It was super cool.
That's amazing. Oh, wow.
So more, that's what I like. I like those kinds of stories. I don't really care so much about this thing you can do in Castlevania. I just want to hear, like, I like the stories of the moment. You know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Although explaining the things is really fun. I watched the Rise of the Tomb Raider speed run, another game I played. So it was and just watching him like just clip through everything and break the game all the time and describe all that stuff is kind of cool. You know?
One day we should try to get Widget Satchel on there.
Man, we've been designing Widget Satchel with some speed runny kind of things in mind, and I'm like, man, that community is like, they're very discriminating. Like they will judge us if we're appropriate for their style of play.
Yeah.
And we're not speedrunners, but neither are the people who designed the games that are speedrunnable. So
I mean, right, yeah.
So here's hoping, right?
Yeah.
We definitely gonna need some people to test it for that specifically. Oof, I can't wait.
Yeah. And on that note.
Yeah. Come on, Arthur, we're all counting on you.
You have to know that I don't.
You have to know.
You have to press A to jump to go fast.
Okay, that was.
No, I don't know. I don't have anything, you guys. I'm sorry.
That's all right. You got your on days and your off days.
I just really hope this is somebody's first episode. We don't know what we're doing.
Hello, everybody. I'm good at topic. Ugh. I'm good at talking, and now we're going to talk about the language of games.
All right,
that was a much better.
Nice save.
Beautiful.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about those like gaming conventions, things that a lot of games do and that you just intuitively know how to do because you've played a lot of games, but aren't necessarily written down anywhere, or like if you haven't played a lot of games, you wouldn't necessarily know. I wanted Mark to do his topic on gaming conventions so we could do gaming conventions and gaming conventions as the two topics, but that didn't work out.
You can't have everything in life.
Darn.
Just think how that transition would have went.
It would have been so great.
We'll never know now.
Lost to time.
Yep.
Episode ? So like press A to jump is one. And health bars. I know you've got a lot of opinions about health bars, Stephen.
I have a lot of opinions about a lot of things, but specifically about HUDs and stuff. I can go on that, but I wanted to talk about HUDs in a different episode.
Okay.
But health bars are our language that we have in games that are kind of weird because like people don't work by health points. Like if you get hit in the arm, you don't suddenly lose 5 health points. Your arm hurts. So it's like a different language.
My health bar.
I saw this tweet the other day where somebody, I think it was like a DM was talking and playing in Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, and then somebody was like, "How much health do you have?" And then the DM was like, "Wait, hold on, you can't ask them how much health they have because we're in the world, and in the world you don't know how much health you have." And so the other person was like, "How are you feeling right now?" And then the person answered, from a scale of 81 to 85, I'm about a 57. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. I want to see if I can find that and link that too.
That's great.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, there's a whole category of like DM telling stories about their stupid players. I love reading those.
But yes, health bars, they're weird. That's all I had to say about that.
And that's changed. I'm thinking about first-person shooters.
Yeah.
Like there's now 2 types of health bars: regenerative health and non-regenerative health. And that was like in the mid 2000s. I think it was like a big it was Halo the first one to do that differently. I might be thinking of it wrong.
That's because I think Halo had shields, and those would regenerate. But like after you lose your shields, you still had your health, and that would not regenerate.
This might be then a Call of Duty thing, or so. There was some big game that popularized this, and then it became. Like, it just completely shifted. All games are regenerative health.
Yeah.
You just duck behind cover or go around a wall because, like, it's not fun to die in the middle of a level, right?
Yeah.
And so, and each firefight was the metric by which you would survive or not. So that was kind of cool. But then people were like, no, we want it. That's too easy, and it ends up being a different kind of challenge. I think now we're at a place where developers just choose what's best for their mechanics now.
Which is how they should do it.
Right. But now we have those two bits of language, whereas when it was new, it was weird to people. Right?
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Like when these things first came out, they were like super innovative transgressions of previous like tropes and conventions and stuff.
Right, like everybody just assumed there'd be health packs. And then all of a sudden there were no health packs. And they're like, what? But it ended up working out. And so now you are somehow able to determine whether or not your game has health packs or not based on like how the game feels and the UI around it and stuff. So
health packs is another thing.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, like I'm just thinking about like the earliest version, like D&D is where where health bars come from, like stats. But a lot of early video games had like hit points, like hearts, right? Where you had like 3 instead of like 50 or whatever.
Right.
And every damage would just deal you 1 or whatever. And it wasn't all games like that. But I'm thinking of an early example of Gauntlet, where you had a countdown, which is your health, that just ticked down.
Oh, yeah.
And every time you got hit, you lost more of those points. Really weird. That system is so bizarre, but in a time where those things weren't so standardized, it wasn't weird to people, I guess, because everything was as different from everything else.
That's true.
Right?
Also, that was an arcade game, and they were trying to get you quarters. So, like,
fair point.
having your health tick down kind of helps with that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
But no, that's a good example. I like that. Oh boy, we've ballooned this topic. Continue, Martha. Sorry.
Oh, no. That's what I want is to just, people to talk about it. That's the point of a podcast. Talk about it. Anyway.
Yes, Stephen.
Of course.
So a lot of these things I'm getting on this list that I have are from a discussion on Slack, our Slack community group for Minneapolis game dev people. And another thing they said is like red barrels explode, and kind of piggybacking on that is like red things are negative or like dangerous, and then green things are good and health or positive or go forward.
Yes.
And that how that is sort of more of a cultural convention, like that isn't a lot of things in our like Western culture or whatever.
Yeah.
Stoplights, etc.
Yeah. Is that different in other parts of the world?
Yeah. Apparently I think someone was saying like in China, red is like
it's like good luck.
Good luck.
Right? Yeah.
Oh.
And like positive financial things are red instead of going into the red, like that's negative here.
Yeah. Huh. That's interesting.
So like there's different color cues that might not translate to different groups. And it's interesting that we picked red and green because those are like really common colorblind things to like not be able to distinguish between.
That's true.
Yeah, speaking of red exploding barrels, we just added those to Widget Satchel.
We did. We didn't make them green. Ooh, we should make them green. No, we shouldn't make them green.
They do go boom. So they work as expected.
Yes.
There's a level or a track in Hydro Thunder that's called Castle Von Boom. And it's got lots of explodey barrels.
And they're red?
They're all red.
Nice.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of like more realistic games try to play with this in a way that's like, there's a little red label on a normal barrel or something.
Yeah.
Like, you're not fooling anybody.
We know it's explosive. Goodness.
Well, that's the thing you want players to know. Like, it's that language that's so important. And like, as we put worlds onto our games, that the language of games becomes sort of, it tugs at it a little bit.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. In the more realistic games, they play with it in a way that makes sense for the real world. That like, because like we have signs that make things clear that this is hazardous or explosive or whatever else. So they'll just use that language and they'll put that on their barrels, and then it's clear. But like they'll also color them red because it's extremely obvious at that point. At least for people who play games a lot.
Whereas in the real world, a red barrel usually just has like oil in it.
Right. Yeah. Which could be explosive.
You could burn it.
Not if you burn it. Yes. Just burn it all.
Well, that's just that's movie logic. Then it's just, you shoot one of those. But
that's true.
That's probably, it might have been where a lot of those come from. Like you see the oil drum kind of serve as exploding barrels, even though that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another example. This is like in Borderlands. They have things that are like red that are explosive, and then anything that has a green light on it, like lockers or washing machines. You can open them and there'll be like loot inside.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So like you're just trained to look for like green glowing lights because that's good.
Yeah.
Treasure.
I love systems like that because I think those systems in the real world that are like that are very useful. So I like when they're in games, and I like when they're sort of taking their logical extreme. A really good example of this, and it uses red as well in a different way, is Mirror's Edge.
Oh yeah.
Where the correct path or the paths that are open to you are in red, and they're sort of subtly tinted, right? Everything, the world is very white, very monochromatic, or desaturated rather, and then red things tend to be your path. I think orange things are like manipulatable objects. I kind of forget exactly what all the things are, but there's these really this color language that is unique to that game.
Yeah.
And I really like it. They called it runner's vision. The idea was that like if you're a runner, it's a parkour game, and if you're a runner, then you understand this, and this is how you see it. It's not really what the world looks like, but there's no wavy of particle effects or anything. It's a very clean aesthetic design. I really liked it. But the way they fictionalized it was to say that this is just how how she sees the world, the main character. Now in the sequel, they just mess it up completely, where like you have these embeddable contact lenses that highlight different things using the runner's. It just ruined it completely.
Yeah,
like it ended up giving them more flexibility to do more things with it. Like it could turn on and off, and so you could introduce dramatic moments where you don't have those cues and stuff like that. But it ended up kind of ruining what was really good about and innovative about that particular use of color for their systems.
There's a lot of things that were wrong with that sequel.
Yeah.
Speaking of sequels.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
One that you brought up, Stephen, is right trigger to shoot.
Yes. I use the left trigger most of the time. Just the right one. And the left trigger is normally used to like aim more effectively.
Oh yeah, that's true.
In most shooters anyway.
I think a lot of that is because people are right-handed and you pull a trigger like a gun.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. But the left to aim, right to shoot also has a right to left like temporal pattern.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like
first
then second.
You do the left thing first, make sure you can aim correctly, and then you shoot with the
So I wonder if those just stumbled into each other, or if there was real more deliberate design there.
Yeah.
I would bet that is kind of some of that is just coincidence, and that's one of the reasons why it's endured. But I think it might have just started just because. Also, the face buttons are on the right, and those are action buttons.
Right.
So there's,
Well, yeah, part of the reason why they do that is because then you can use that. You can still have your face buttons to do stuff, and then also shoot with the trigger. So like your thumb is free to do things.
Right.
To aim and shoot.
Yeah.
So like there's a reason for that convention, I suppose.
Right. That's why shooting moved off the face buttons to a trigger at all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Yeah, it has a lot to do with hand and like how our hands work.
Yeah. There's a really good one there where the difference between Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 in that era of consoles. On the Xbox 360, the triggers were nice and squishy and felt like had good action.
Yeah.
On the PlayStation 3, the analog triggers were not great.
No.
And so many games, because you don't actually need analog control to fire a weapon in most games. The standard on PlayStation 3 was the bumpers.
That's right.
L1, R1 were the firing buttons for most games that were cross-platform. And I think Sony themselves did it as well.
I mean, most games in general, like Uncharted, I think you shoot with the shoulder buttons.
And so it was. I'm trying to think of, there was a series where I played one on Xbox and one on PlayStation, and it was like kind of confusing. And I was like, oh, I know why these are different. I didn't discover it until then.
Yeah.
But yeah, the triggers on the PS3 controller were not great, but on the PS4 they're really good, and so it that convention has changed. Now they're the same on both of those.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about how controllers, like there's a whole language around those, like the fact that we call the top buttons on the top shoulder buttons and the buttons on the front face buttons. It's like we're mapping it to a face.
To a body.
Yeah.
Sort of, yeah.
Which is really interesting. Also with that is button placement. Like you were saying, like Nintendo and Sony, or it was Sony versus everybody else, right? Or how did that work? You knew about that.
So I love this story. I love telling this story. And I think that I'm sure parts of it are apocryphal, but so what Martha's referring to is that on a Nintendo console, the A button is the right face button. On Xbox, A is the bottom face button of the diamond pattern. And on PlayStation, the cross button, which is the main action button, is also on the bottom. So Nintendo's the odd man out in this scenario. But the story is much more interesting than that. So Nintendo was the Super Nintendo establishes the diamond pattern, the 4 ABXY.
Right.
And then a couple years later, Sony comes out with a PlayStation. It has its 4 things. They very specifically didn't want to use letters. They didn't want to use numbers the way that the Sega was using on the Genesis.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, let's do something new and different. We're a new player. And, I think a lot of that was just the desire to be different more than any other logical reason. I think the designer would even say so. Mm-hmm. And so now in Japan, the circle means is a yes. It's a check mark.
Right.
That's culturally, that's what that means. And the X is no, right? So yes and no. So whereas in America, like it's not exactly the opposite, but X feels more like an action to us, and so X and O. So anyway, so the PlayStation in Japan to this day, in fact, has the circle button is the main action button, and the X button is the back button.
Oh yeah,
yes, and for developers who are making games on PlayStation, if you release it in Japan, you want to stick to that, and then if you release in the West, you do switch it. So it's games are different depending on what region they are because players expect that. So in Japan, Sony is the same as Nintendo because that's how it goes, right? Now, when PlayStation came to America, Sony America, the division of Sony, was not thinking too much about the future. Mm-hmm. And they were like, you know what? It makes more sense to have the cross button be the action button and the circle button to be the secondary back button. That feels more right to us as Americans. Mm-hmm. So they switched it. And then PlayStation became enormously popular right around the world. And the American game audience is the biggest audience in the world. And so when Microsoft came into play, mm-hmm. they needed their own little thing. And now Microsoft had history in PC gaming where like generic controllers used, ABC, ABXY, whatever. Yeah. So they weren't as interested in being different. So like, well, we'll just use letters. It's fine. But the audience they were going for were PlayStation gamers. Mm. So they put A on the bottom. And so that is what's going on. So it's all Sony America's fault. And so when we think of Nintendo as being different, and Nintendo will never change. It's like iconic to the Nintendo brand, like more so than even for the others. I don't think that the others will change, but
it makes sense too when you're thinking about the Game Boy, because the Game Boy only had 2 buttons.
Yeah.
And they still put them in the same configuration too.
Yeah, and on the original Nintendo, it was BA, and that seems because a lot of times people remember like the 2 buttons and they're just horizontally placed. Mm-hmm. Like, why isn't it AB? Why is it BA? It's because A is closest to your thumb, and B is a little further inward to the controller. Yeah. So that's where that comes from originally. And Nintendo's the odd one out there, and they'll never change. But in Japan, Microsoft is the odd one out, and the Xbox does not sell in Japan.
Right.
Not for that reason, but for other reasons. Uh-huh. So it's for a lot of Eastern gamers, there's not a problem. It's just not a problem. I'm actually really curious about the PlayStation, like the cross and circle, like how it's distributed. I know in Europe and America, North America, and in South America, it is cross is the main, and in Japan, circle is the main button. But I'm curious about like in Southeast Asia and China, like in those other regions in Korea, like what did they do? And I think a lot of that probably has to do with the cultural cachet of the cross meaning a check mark, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure that's probably what tells it. But I think in most places it is like we have it in America because most regions take their cue from American conventions. I love that story because like people complain about like why won't one just change? It's like it's complicated.
It's not Nintendo's fault.
It's not.
They've been consistent this whole time.
Yeah.
I still want to just blame Microsoft.
Yeah. Side note though, the Dreamcast had an ABXY.
It did.
That was set up like the Xbox One. And so I don't really know where that comes into it. I think the story is cleaner without that as a side note, but that might have something to do with it because it came out around the same time as the Dreamcast or the first Xbox.
Right.
But I don't really know what the story is there. Why they abandoned ABC, for example. Mm-hmm. Like I don't know.
That's a good story.
Yeah.
Like that.
So if you're not playing with a controller, you probably are playing with a keyboard.
Why would you though?
Good question,
because
Mark.
PC gaming.
You should use controllers.
But the PC though, and the mouse, and the clicking.
And the clicking. I mean,
it's like a greatest hits on this episode.
But yeah, so because on most keyboards the arrow keys are on the right side. Like the convention has been to use the WASD keys as arrow keys instead, so that you mouse with your right hand, WASD with your left hand.
Yeah.
Do left-handed gamers switch it so they can use the, I've never noticed that.
I would guess that people who use their mouse with the left hand, I'm just guessing now, but I would guess they use IJKL. Just as sort of like a mirroring kind of thing. But it might be that they use, because a lot of times laptop keyboards or certain keyboards, the arrow keys are not arranged exactly the same.
Right.
I really would be curious to know that too. I'm not certain.
If you're left-handed, let us know.
Yeah. Well, I'm left-handed, but I use a computer with my right hand.
Oh.
And
yeah, I thought you were left-handed, so that's why I looked at you.
No, I do a lot of things right-handed just because it's the world we live in. So I play guitar right-handed. No, it's a side note. I love being left-handed on a computer because I do almost all my drawing now digitally with my right hand, but I sketch with my left hand. And when I'm on the computer, I can't use like a Wacom tablet, like, because it doesn't quite, I don't have enough hands to do the right things exactly.
Sure.
I really like having that because my left hand is free to draw, sketch, spin a pencil, do cognitive things with my left hand, which is my dominant hand, while I'm using my right hand to do my dominant activity.
Oh,
so I feel like it's like a pop psychology theory I have that like I'm just really effective because I'm sort of, I could use both halves of my brain or something.
Like it feels more efficient because you're doing more stuff?
I honestly don't know if that's the case, but it really feels like that.
Yeah. Totally.
Now, playing guitar, it ruined me because I'm like, oh, great, my left hand is for all the fingering. That's the complicated stuff. Wrong. Finger picking is the complicated stuff, and I can't do that because I never learned because that's my right hand, and that's just strum it up and down. That's all I ever taught it to do, so sad story.
Yeah.
All right, go on.
Did they make left-hand... Side note, did they make left-hand Guitar Hero guitars?
You can just play it left-handed.
Oh. Yeah, I suppose, because it's not actually, there's no up and down, like, differentiation between the buttons.
And on most of them, you can unscrew the little attachment that, like, the strap attached to and flip it to the other, like, hook part of the guitar so that it will actually flip over. I think that's pretty standard on all those plastic guitars.
I thought that was just so you could spin your guitar around in shows.
Also a reason for it, I'm sure.
I guess. I don't play guitar. Clearly. I did a bass clarinet, and that would be dangerous to be spinning around. So, yeah.
Whack.
Right in the face.
How did Steven knock himself out? He's just doing his cool bass clarinet tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's edit this out.
So back to WASD.
Yes.
Like, I do notice some keyboards have like special like gamer keyboards. Martha's smile is really amazing right now to see her light up at this idea. They have like metal keys because they get a lot of wear.
Oh wow! Do they really have metal keys?
And
you can get like special like keys that you can put in there, and also like that have like texture on them, so you can find them without having to look at the keyboard. And then you can get them where they light up a different color than the rest of the keyboard. Okay. It's very cool. Okay, continue.
Well, the ones I'm most interested in, and I don't think this has caught on with anybody because I don't think it has a lot of developer support, which is analog keys, right? That lets you do actual proper strafing instead of just tap, 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 tap to like, step a little bit. Yeah. That's the problem I've always had with mouse and keyboard is the mouse is like fully fluid and analog and point and click as you've described it, Martha. But the WSAD is just so crude, like compared to a cons having two analog sticks. And it doesn't bother people because games are not designed to require that level of intricacy with strafing movements. But why not? Like, I'm always confused about that.
Yeah.
You should make a game called Strafe Hero.
Nobody will play it. But there are some keyboards that have analog keys for those. And so they can be supported.
So they like you can press different parts of them, or
it just becomes a value of 0 to 1 as you press it down on an analog scale. So games that only support normally will just once they read the 1, it'll just I think there's a piece of software that translates it I think to the game. So it's not. I don't think it needs to be explicitly supported, but games that allow for analog control, or I'm sure there's some utility which lets you map those keys to like the left joystick or something so that it kind of gives those proper values. I haven't looked into it in a while, but I always thought that was really interesting, but I don't think gamers care, like, because they're just used to what they're used to because it's a convention, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
So you were talking, Stephen, a little bit before about like characters, and culturally we think like if we see a big character, beefy character, that they're going to be a tank.
Yeah.
And if they're little, they're going to be super fast.
Right. Yeah. Like this is definitely the case in fighting games. If you have a big, brawny character, they're normally they move slow, but they pack heavy punches. And then the smaller characters are fast and light, so they'll deal little damage with each hit, but they're really quick, so they can get in and out really fast. So yeah, that's a normal convention. I guess it's largely the case just because, in general, fast things move fast, or small things move fast, and big things move slow. That's generally the case.
Yeah, that comes from sort of the almost like an animal instinct that we have. Like
Right.
it's not. I don't know that that's a gaming convention, but it's been solidified.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, like you can pick your character just by sight most of the time
Yeah,
if you want
yeah.
to like figure out what mechanics that you're going to be able to do.
Exactly.
You know what is weird about that is Mario Kart, which has always done this, even from the first one, I think, where Bowser was a little slower but could knock you further if you got hit, and
Yeah.
Toad was zippy and
Oh,
weak.
yeah.
But Mario Kart characters, like actually physically, like how they really representative, are not that different in size.
Yeah.
That's true.
And so it's actually and now that there's so many characters, like knowing the difference between like Yoshi and Luigi, like there are differences, but they're the same height basically.
Yeah.
As far as in terms of Mario Kart.
It's also really weird in Mario Kart because the big, like in the newer ones anyway, the bigger characters have faster max speed but slower acceleration, and the
Yeah.
smaller characters have lower max speed but higher acceleration.
Oh, okay.
So like,
Which
Interesting.
there's some logic to that. But
Yeah.
it's a little counterintuitive perhaps to some people.
yeah, but it's weird. I guess it's like momentum in that way. Like they takes a little bit for the bigger characters to get going, but once they do, they keep going.
Right. Of course, where this breaks down is it's irrespective of which vehicle they have.
Right.
Which would really make the difference.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, you got to haul all of Bowser around. You got to have a powerful engine for that.
Yeah, can't be doing that in a scooter.
Yeah.
So the next thing on the list is saves and autosaves. Like when games first started, there really wasn't a save thing. You just had to like start over basically, right?
And then they implemented passwords, or was that before? Did
Well,
they
that
have
was a
saves
way
before?
around having to have any memory. It's just to
Yeah.
have checkpoints pre-built. With
Yeah.
Metroid did that.
Yeah, they used it. They did that a lot on Game Boy games, and I remember we had like lists of checkpoints.
Yeah.
As kids, it was great. But now we've gotten to the point where like you can save and come back to whatever you were doing, or save and or make a new decision or whatever.
Yeah. You don't. I mean, most games you don't have to save at all.
Yeah, it
Right?
just does.
The act of saving is just not as much of a thing. But if you go to a menu, like games that still do require you to actually save your progress are really, really explicit about their warnings.
Yeah.
They're like, just so you know, this is not one of those games.
Yeah, Nier Automata does that.
Really?
Like so, the first in the demo that first section, if you die at all, you have to go back to the beginning because you can't save, and there's a story reason or blah blah blah. And so a lot of people would complain. They get all the way to the boss and in that beginning section, and they die, and they have to start at the beginning. They're like, what the heck? But they're really explicit about it. They're like, this game does not have autosaves. You gotta save every time, and people still complain about it.
And that's actually a game mechanic in
Yes.
that game. That's supposed to be part of your gameplay experience.
There's
so much meta in
It's
that
part of the
game.
gameplay experience and narrative experience because you're this
Yeah.
robot that can rebuild itself, but only rebuild itself at certain stations.
Yeah.
So that's where you save.
Mm.
So you got to like go to a place to save. You can't just like make saves everywhere.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bunch of games that like do kind of both autosaves and your own saves. Like I know Dishonored and Dishonored 2 do that, where like it auto saves every so often, but then also you can explicitly make saves, and like that becomes part of it. If you mess up, you can go back or like you're like, oh crap, I killed this person, I didn't want to kill them, and so you can like go back to an old save.
Yeah. Saving and is really useful in games where you make a lot of decisions, and those impact like future decisions and stuff, because you can always go back and make the new decision if you want. So like visual novels, they have a whole bunch of saves and stuff because of that reason. So you can go back and make new decisions.
Right. It's sticking your finger in the book
Yeah.
before you turn the page.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's also like some games that there's like a higher level of save, like like for example, most of the Pokemon games you can only have one save
Right.
file,
Yeah.
like only one player. Which is why it forced families to have to buy more than one if they had more than one child.
That's true.
But then like Zelda, you could have like 3 saves or something.
Right, the save slot.
Save
right?
slot.
Yeah.
That's the word I was trying to find. Yes. And now most games have it so that you can have multiple games.
Right.
Right, so like an untold number because scroll lists can go forever.
Yeah.
Right, and I know there's like some things for console games anyway. There's sometimes this is done at the system level. Like I know PlayStation is not every game does it, but sometimes when you just hit save in a game, it takes you to a PlayStation menu and the list and just like new or replace or whatever. And so that's kind of built in at the platform level on a lot of these things now.
Yeah, like you pick which user of the console you want to play as.
Right. We just put in save slots in Widget Satchel.
Yes.
We're gonna have 3, just
Yeah.
like the classic games.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like it.
That's really cool.
but you don't have to do it manually. It'll autosave for you. No problem.
Yeah.
I was listening to a talk, maybe it was at GDC, about save points, and how figuring out where your save points should be is like really difficult.
Yeah. Totally, because you don't want it to make it feel like the save points are giving you an advantage in a fight if you mess up, because that feels terrible. But you also don't want to have to do like 30 minutes of work every time. So like you got to place it in positions that make the player feel like it was fair, but also not fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you want a little bit of that tension of
Right.
like of you don't want to lose your progress.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just can goof off and just move forward.
Right. You want the players to feel like they're losing time but not progress. I think.
Okay.
I think that's how I'm saying it now. I guess that's the way I am interpreting it. Like in the middle of a boss, you don't want to feel like if you die at this boss, you have to do the Nier Automata thing and start the entire process over. But you also want to feel like you have to defeat this challenge, and this is the time, or this is like that time you set to focus on fighting it. So like I think as a player, I would be fine with using my time to fight this boss over and over and over again and failing and then hopefully succeeding eventually. Whereas with if I had to do the entire level over, I feel like I'm wasting losing progress each time.
Right. Like you died in the boss. You didn't so bring you back further than that feels like it's just you did that already. You proved yourself there. Yeah. And so I think like deciding where those points are is really about breaking up your game into sort of like conceptual chunks.
Yeah.
Where like a player wouldn't even conceive to have to do it again once they get to a certain point.
Right.
And then also in the middle of it, if they do have to do it, that it makes sense to them to have to redo that part, that they didn't complete that section. Right. And then certain games, those are big sections, certain games, those are smaller.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely easier said than done.
When I first got Borderlands the pre-sequel, I may or may not have gotten a legal copy. And they may or maybe not legal copy had a glitch in it where
it might have
had a glitch in it where the last 2 or 3 fast travel points didn't spawn correctly. Wouldn't let me fast travel to them, and they're basically the safe spots because they're where you get respawned, and all of the enemies respawn if you get respawned back. So I had to do the last part of the game basically straight without.
Oh.
You would have had to.
Right. If that was a thing that I did. I now have a legal copy, which may or may not have been the case the whole time.
It's all perfectly legal.
But yeah, when glitches happen with the saves, that can really impact your game.
Oh yeah, I think the most furious gamers will get is when they have to play the thing they liked again.
Yeah. Oh darn.
I do like the way you boiled that down. Because
That's just kind of what it comes down to.
I know, but I will still get extremely angry when I lose my save.
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, it's like I enjoyed playing this game. Yeah, but
it's totally like when the saves get corrupted. It's totally the film burns out in the middle of the third act or something.
Yeah.
It's like, at least in the old days, you couldn't just turn off the projector, have everyone wait in the lobby for 5 minutes and then go back. You had to you couldn't rewind 35 minutes of film.
Yeah.
So you just had to go to another screening late or something. It's that same feeling of
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just you did all this already and it was fun. and I had a good time, but like I don't want to do it again. Yeah.
There's been some high profile cases of that. I mean, we could link in the show notes, but I think everyone knows what we're talking about.
Basically,
They probably heard about it. Like, but yeah, just the fury of it, because it's like, it isn't a matter of like, oh, this game has a bug that doesn't let me do this or whatever. Like, people get upset about that, but I think people understand, or they find ways around it, or they make jokes about it.
Right.
I think when it's your save,
Yeah.
like they get more emotionally invested in that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, especially if you've been building up a character and
Yeah.
then you have to like make the same decisions, or like you found really cool items in a like procedurally generated item
Yeah.
thing or
Yep.
whatever, and you'll never find them again.
They just don't want to be told that in the end it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Burn on gamers, so I guess. I don't know why I'm so salty about that. I don't know. Just like, well, the things that matter to you.
Yeah, true that. I do want to bring up that, like, in video games, oftentimes you'll find food in the weirdest places, but it always gives you help. Like trash cans or dumpsters
Yeah.
or enemy carcasses. That's weird.
Oh, yeah. That is a good point.
Right.
Like, you just stabbed this enemy and it bled all over, and now you're getting the meat from
Yep.
the thing,
Yep.
or like they're
A full-
carrying a whole loaf of bread.
Yeah, or a fully cooked chicken.
Yeah, the chicken in the garbage can. It's like the Streets of Rage or something.
yeah.
Oh man, that's I love that trope going way back. And that's a great fun thing for indie developers to do, is to play on that language, that convention for gamers. The one I always find the most hilarious though is like BioShock Infinite, which
yeah.
is the most self-serious game there ever was.
Yeah.
And you can find hot dogs in the garbage can. Like
Wow. Why are they in the garbage?
you can go to like the bank and
Yeah.
like go into the safety deposit box of this ruined thing and find a bag of chips. Like,
Oh, that's
that's
beautiful.
crazy.
That's just
It's because it's randomized,
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff, and it's just like it breaks the illusion so completely. But that convention is so strong that a lot of people don't question it at all.
Oh.
You know,
Right. Another one is like infinite inventory, where like, the main character has a bajillion and 2 pockets.
oh yeah,
And
yeah.
can just store, a shotgun in one pocket and a giant safe in another one, and thousands of dollars in the next.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fun stuff.
Yeah, I think who made this video? There's some comedy video where someone tried to do a video game level, like LARP in real life, a video game level with picking up everything they found and somehow like attaching it to themselves, and like at the end they're like waddling with all this stuff. It's pretty good.
I would love it if like a video game played off that to the point where like you could just literally take anything and put it in your inventory, like enemies and stuff, or your health bar, and just like slot it.
Oh my god, Stephen, I will make this game with you.
That does sound really interesting.
I know, right? Let's do it.
It's just like analyzing the logical extreme of a system like that. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Call it the game of holding.
The game of holding.
Oh my god, you guys.
Nice Games Club Game Jam.
next jam. Let's do it.
Yes.
It's funny. We have, in Widget Satchel, the conceit of that game is when you pick up collectibles, your satchel fills up and gets heavy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So weight is an important game mechanic in the game. So we were thinking like, that also changes how the pathing works. And long story short, we need to come up with some other type of collectible that would motivate you to get to secret areas, but not reward you with a bunch of widgets that would make it harder for you to get out of that area.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, let's have this system called trinkets, where there's just like little bits of fun, jokey items that you collect that are just sort of like fun collectibles. And we're like, okay, great, but they have to weigh nothing. They have to conceivably weigh nothing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it totally breaks the logic of the game. And, the game has a lot of broken logic if you really put your mind to it. But
Right.
we do have a set of sort of like narrative rules. And so it was a little tricky to come up with lists of things that would make sense, that wouldn't feel like, oh, this is heavier than a 9-volt battery, so it can't. So the player it'll strain credibility to use this as a trinket, and we ended up with it in a good place.
Yeah.
But like it took a lot more thinking than you might expect.
Right. Well, actually, Widget Satchel is a good example of subverting conventions, because normally when you have inventory, it does not affect your movement at all. But
Until you get like if it affects your inventory, it's when you've reached over encumbered.
encumbrance, yeah. That is the most obnoxious thing in Skyrim. But yeah, like we play with that because like especially in platformers, like when you pick up a bunch of coins, you don't have to think about like Mario not being able to jump as high or move.
Yeah,
as
where
fast.
does he put those coins?
Exactly. You don't have to think about
That's
it.
the question that Widget Satchel answers.
Yes, in your widget satchel. But like, there's examples of games that like break those conventions and things. That are sometimes frustrating when they do that.
But even we had... Oh, go ahead.
Nope.
Okay. Even we had trouble totally subverting that.
Yeah.
Because in our original Jam version, we had this curve, which was as you picked up, each widget would make you so much heavier, right? But then we have to design platforming puzzles around this which is difficult enough already to like do a system like that.
Yeah.
We've found.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if the change is so minute, then the player will have a hard time understanding it. So we implemented something called weight tiers, which is you can pick up as many widgets up to a certain point, and then your tier changes, and then that's when the stats change. And it doesn't really follow the rule that we established, which is that everything makes you heavier. But narratively, that is still in place. It just now aligns better with using the systems so the player will understand it better. And so each tier has a name and a UI element as well, which for players who want to investigate it can really like find out. But for the most part, the changes are at a threshold, and that makes it easier for us to design, and it makes it like possible for players to understand. Because originally it's like just a slow dawning, and then once they figure out the rule, they're like, well, then how do I know how much I can carry to jump this high? And nothing in the game can tell you that without being really explicit about it. So we had to refine it and dial it back a little bit in a kind of interesting way.
Yeah. But like, that's an example of trying to do that and trying to subvert the trope and like having difficulty doing it at the same time. But yeah, I mean, it's fun to be able to design around those challenges with Widget Satchel and like.
Yeah. Oh,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's fun once you know all these rules to like pick one thing to flip and that's how you can find new innovative games and game ideas and mechanics and stuff is like, what if we did it like this?
Yeah. When you try to subvert these rules, that's when you learn why they're there in the first place.
Yeah.
It's not just a matter of like a ball rolling down a hill. There are reasons for these things, you know?
I mean, we went over a lot of them while we were talking here.
But yeah, like I wanted to specifically talk about this because I play a lot of Flint Hook. And for some reason, the Flint Hook designers decided that red equals good and green equals bad. Red equals you can buy this thing in the store. Green equals you don't have enough money for it. And it is the most frustrating thing I think I've ever had to deal with in a game. It takes so much cognitive load while shopping to ignore all the green things that are green and shiny and bright and go for the thing that is red.
Yeah.
Like,
Are there other really like good examples of ones that just break things for no good reason?
There's an example of a game that breaks things for a reason. Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. That is a game on GameCube. I did not play because this is a horror game. But the reasoning, like this game will like, I guess you're like going insane or something, which is, you know, I guess is a troubling way of saying things. But the way that the game works is like it'll like do a lot of tricks on you to make you stop playing the game or make you feel like you've lost progress or make you feel like something's wrong, like in a weird way. So like, for example, they might have like you're playing through the game and you go down this hallway and then a pop-up might show up and say your save was corrupted. Yeah. And players would be like, oh no, I gotta start over, like you were just saying. But it is actually just like in the game that like your save was not corrupted. But like it's messing with the meta of the game itself.
Yeah. Isn't there also one where it changes to a blue screen? It says like video 1 in the corner or something.
Oh yeah.
To mimic as if your console was unplugged.
Yeah. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Like I love that idea. I'm never gonna play that game. It's too scary. But I love that idea. It's really cool.
This is a famous one in the first Metal Gear Solid game where you're doing a boss battle and you're totally ineffective. Like he's invincible.
Oh yeah.
And I think you can hold your own, but you can't make progress. And there's subtle hints as to how to solve it. And the way to solve it is to unplug your controller, plug it into player 2.
Oh, that's right.
Because player 2, because the boss reads your mind, and when you plug into player 2, you're hiding from his mind reading, basically.
Yeah.
Which is a clever, like the things about, I don't like those games for a lot of reasons, but one of that's nice about it is they do actually take a lot of that breaking the fourth wall in a way that still keeps it like, or they sort of like see through the fourth wall without breaking it.
Yeah.
Exactly, is maybe a better way to put it.
That's a Kojima-esque way of doing anything.
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff.
And the other fun part about that one is that it'll the boss will read, if you have a memory card in there, it'll read, there's a certain list of like other Konami games, I think, which it will like, the boss will say, oh, I see you like such and such. I don't know any other Konami games. Which was even on the GameCube version, it was the same. There were a couple of Nintendo games or something like that. Like like that's kind of cool. That kind of stuff. It's playing with what player knows and how they expect to engage with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that game we played for one of the Nice Plays that would read your computer's
one shot.
Yes, one shot.
Yeah, and it was like, hello, Mark.
Yeah, it was weird.
People on the Slack, when we were talking about conventions and stuff, we're talking about a couple games that messed with the health bar thing and made it more realistic in different ways. Is Not Short talked a lot about Project Zomboid, which you have to use, like, if you get hit or some part of your body gets hurt, you get, like, it affects different parts of what you do. So, like, if your leg gets hit, then you move slower or something like that. Or if your arm gets hit, it takes longer to switch items or something.
Ah, okay.
And then people were talking about Metal Gear Solid 3, where you had to use specific healing items to heal specific injuries, and you had to like use them in a specific order.
Okay.
And then you were talking about Bushido Blade or something
I got
like
it confused with Samurai Showdown, which is a different game. It's a 2D fighting game, but Bushido Blade is a 3D fighting game where like you're all samurais, and there's no health bars or anything. It's if you get stabbed in the chest, you automatically die. But like if you get stabbed in the arm or something, you don't die. You just lose the ability to use that arm or that leg or whatever, that limb. So it changes like traditional fighting game language in that way, which is pretty interesting.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought of this when I was talking about Borderlands, is they made a thing that instead of like when you first die, you go into this thing called Fight for Your Life, which is a little countdown timer. And then if you can kill an enemy in that time, you get revived automatically.
Right.
Which was kind of a cool way to give you a second chance without being like weird about it or something. Are there any other games you can think of that like mess with the tropes and that we haven't already talked about?
I think I might have mentioned this on the show before, but one of the problems I had with Assassin's Creed Origins was that the swing, the melee attack was mapped to the right bumper or L or R1, and I had the hardest time getting over that because the convention for a lot of third-person action games is to put it on X or square.
Yeah,
right, because it's melee.
Yeah, right.
The newest God of War does the same thing. It has it on the trigger,
and it's meant to free up your thumb for other buttons. But I'm not gonna do that. I just
also with God of War, you can throw your axe and stuff. So there's some reasoning for mapping, it. But like I could not do. I didn't like it.
Yeah. And so there's always these little moments of like, are you fighting a convention because you have a good reason to, or are you fighting it to subvert it?
Yeah.
Or are you fighting it because you don't know better? Like, I don't know. There's like a lot of different reasons why these rules are there, and a lot of different reasons why you challenge them.
Yeah, I've always wanted to make a game where like it's just a traditional platformer, but all the buttons are randomized. I'm debating on whether or not I want it to be like randomized every time you press the button. So you have to find the new jump button every time you even move. But that sounds just annoying. So maybe not.
Sounds like a certain toothbrushing game that
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, the tooth is out there. The first Game Jam game Martha and I worked on had that where the controls were, you had to discover them.
Yeah.
And that was part of the gameplay. Although for a full platformer, I think that would be like controller tossingly frustrating.
Yeah, I imagine so.
But it'd be a good little experiment that, to put on itch.
Yeah, I'm not trying to sell it to anybody. I just want to try.
Yeah, don't take people's money for that.
No.
Clawbreaker
does weird control things because we had to make enough buttons for you to do everything.
Yeah, it is essentially platform mechanics, but you use the bumpers to move left and right instead of the arrows.
Right, and the control sticks move your arms and aim your arms instead of like moving the character.
Yeah.
It's really weird, but it works.
And then consequently you hold the thing like a claw. So
yeah.
which is great.
Yeah. I don't think
It's a crab-based control scheme, not a human-based control scheme.
Definitely. One thing I wanted to bring up is that my mom recently said that she really only played one game a lot, and it was Ghosts and Goblins.
Yeah.
When she was younger, and like as she's grown older and stuff, like she hasn't really played games. But me and my brother and my dad would play games all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was like, if I ever wanted to play any of these newer games, I feel like I need to play the older ones to have an understanding of what the newer ones are how they work.
Oh, it builds on it.
Right.
Yeah. It's a history.
So it's kind of like it's really difficult if you haven't been playing games a lot to get into playing games, because like a lot of these conventions that we were talking about do not make sense in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you're like, if you have no understanding of how video games work and you jump into a thing and you find this full whole cooked chicken in a dumpster, you're not going to eat it because it's in the dumpster. That's nasty. But like if you play games all the time, you just, you need health and you're like, oh, this is food, I can eat it.
And food will give you health. You know that.
Yes.
You might not know that.
Right. Yeah. Like, so like those kinds of things, it's kind of like, these are the kinds of things we don't think about. Like we make games, we play games, but like we don't think about how it's kind of difficult to even approach games because of all of these different languages that we have an understanding of that people who have not experienced games don't have.
That's definitely true. When you're trying to target your game to an audience, you have to say like, well, what can I expect this audience to bring to it? Like you find a turkey in a garbage can, you're like, I'm not gonna eat that, I'll fall asleep.
Right.
There's a really good example. There's a really long Twitter thread by Rami Ismail where he sort of documents his mom learning to play Final Fantasy 15. And the first tweet is like, got my mom Final Fantasy 15. She's learning twin stick controls. And then it's just like dozens of tweets. And then she went and played Dragon Age Inquisition. And now she's playing like a lot of games. And like, and it's a really interesting story of someone learning how to play modern games, shepherded by someone who is like very friendly and like a wonderful guide, like Rami Ismail is. And I find that really interesting. My wife, Dale, her first like twin stick game was Portal 2. We played the co-op mode together. Mm-hmm. And Portal 2, I guess because Valve makes it and they're more of a PC game developer at their heart, there's a lot of control options you can have, including changing the twin sticks so that the left stick is move back and forward and turn left and right. And then the right stick is strafe left and right and look up and down. Which it switches what the horizontal movement on both sticks does.
Yeah.
And Dale preferred playing that for a long time, and I kept trying to tell her, like, not every game is going to let you do this.
Yeah.
But she insisted, and that's how she was able to get into that. And she's played a lot of games, including Final Fantasy 15, and she's got it now. But like it does, when you're just not familiar with it, it takes a while. And what I find funny about that scheme in particular is that's how GoldenEye worked. The first like console first-person shooter, basically, where the analog stick was turning left and right, and the C buttons were strafing and looking up and down. And I remember,
yeah, you're right.
And I remember when because I played that game a lot, and then when I played, I think the next console shooter, I don't remember what it was, but it took me a minute, okay. I mean,
yeah, it takes a minute to like even understand the language.
Yeah,
like I've seen my brother show Hyperdot to people a lot. And that game, in terms of like video games, is extremely simple because there's really only one thing you need to know, and that's move with the control stick.
Right, and there are 3 things on the controller that you can do that with.
Yeah, exactly.
2 sticks in the D-pad.
Right, yeah. So there's a lot of options for players, but a lot of people are just scared away from even the controller itself because like there's all these things on there, even though you don't need them, and just like the idea of moving with the control stick is already kind of foreign because that's not how you move in real life.
Yeah.
So it's still something you have to get used to. It's something that I don't really think about very often. I take for granted a lot.
That game needs trackball controls.
It could
so you can put it in bars.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That'd be a good place for it.
Yeah. It's like, how do you teach people that in a way that they can, it's not condescending, but also like, helpful.
It helps to imagine where the things you aren't familiar with. And I'm sure there's a class of gamer who there is no example. But for me, it's like MMO controls, like the number key for all the different shortcuts. And
man, there's so many
and
keys.
there's a lot of conventions in MMOs that help people onboard to other games of its type. But and I guess MOBAs are like that too, where you have a lot of keyboard shortcuts that are sort of standard in some sense. I feel utterly lost, and I professionally use a keyboard every day. So like,
Well, I mean, one way that helps is like just make sure that the key makes sense for what you're trying to do. Like oftentimes the map button to pop up the map is the M button.
uh-huh.
I mean, because
And grenade is G, and
stuff like that. Yeah, that helps a little bit.
I mean, it only gets you so far though.
It really does. You're right.
Yeah.
Because then you got F1s and F2s and all that. that's MMOs though. That's,
oh man. Speaking of control schemes, Elite Dangerous is a game that I have such a hard time with.
Yeah.
Because you're in space, so you can go literally any direction, and like I've had to change it all around so that my strafing and turning, like flipping around keys are all separate or like different than the defaults and stuff. And there's so many shortcut keys that you can make, and like Dylan shares his control scheme files out with people who are starting, so you can just like import it. Because he's like, this is much better. Then they're all on the controller.
Yeah.
And then you like have only a few on the keyboard that you have to do. But yeah.
goodness.
Crazy.
That seems like
That's definitely a genre where the convention, because it's not as the fully free moving space simulator is not it's not as not popular enough to have developed one standard for controls or for like visual indicators. Like what's the horizon in space? Like if there is none, then what's the convention we're going to use instead to do that? And there doesn't seem to be an agreement amongst that thing. I played Descent long ago, which was one of the first games like that, where it was basically Doom, but but in all dimensions and whatever. And that game, you get lost so quickly because it had nothing to help you, and that's kind of still true, right?
Right. Yeah. Some games are just so unique that like they have to create their own language for themselves.
Yeah.
In order to get it to work,
which is also fine.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Like it's just you can like making up your own language for your game is totally fine too. I mean, like fighting games are weird in that they have different kinds of. Some fighting games have a heavy hit and a light hit, and some fighting games just have different buttons for the different ways you attack, like horizontal versus vertical. They're all different. Like they make sense for whatever game you're trying to make. So
that's a really good one because fighting game controls. So sometimes the famous like the uppercut is you roll your thumb over the D-pad or whatever, like in an uppercutty motion.
Yeah,
like that. There's still some of that in games where they try in fighting games, right? They try to like physicalize it and make the metaphor, but there's just too many things to do for that all to work for everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, that reminds me of there's the skate game that people really wanted to talk about at E3 this year, and then they got the session game or whatever. It's a separate thing. But anyways, Skate has controls that like sort of try to mimic the actions you would do when you're actually skating.
With the thumbsticks, right?
Yeah, with the thumbsticks, which was pretty cool. It was kind of hard to get into, but once you got it, it felt cool.
Yeah. There's the question of like how much to abstract versus how much to simulate. I think it's contextual depending on what type of game works best for that.
Right. Yeah.
Well, now we're on to the sequel to my topic.
That was a gimme.
Yeah, that one was easy.
This is my topic, the long-awaited sequels. So I want to talk about sequels in games and how they're different from other sequels in other properties, and it's definitely a big industry topic. I think people are familiar with sequels if they played any video games, because they're much more common, I think, than even in films, which has become. I mean, the entertainment industry is franchise and sequel based anyway, but games ever so much more so.
Yeah.
So the main difference, I think, is that for the perception anyway, is that people tend to think that movie sequels get worse and worse. They're cashing in. They trade on an interesting thing and they ground it. There's no edges left, and it gets worse and worse. There are some exceptions, but in games, sequels tend to get better and better. Because they're refined experiences. And on the other hand, stories in games, have the same mixed history as stories in film.
True.
But it just says there's more to games than that, I guess.
Yeah.
So I kind of maybe just talk about a bunch of sort of famous examples, good, bad, the sort of model that things use.
Yeah.
The thing I'm thinking of, the example I think of for like sequels being a thing in games is like the Batman Arkham games.
Okay.
Which are like each one is better than the previous one. I mean, that's subjective, but like there's more to it. It's the refined, it becomes more of true version of itself. It's like it had 3 tries to get it to be what it wanted to be.
Right, yeah.
And I think that's true for a lot of these franchises, which like it sort of they have a vision and they can get most of the way there, and it's a complete idea. And then like once they get another crack at it, they can sort of do it more like how they wanted to do it. Like, so there's that pull between refinement and innovation, I guess.
Yeah.
Because some sequels are just totally different, and that's a big strength of them. But gamers generally buy a sequel because they want more and better of the same, which isn't like a knock on that impulse. That is what sometimes can be good about these things. So there's a bunch of really famous good ones. So like Mario 3 might be the most famous like sequel that did that, where it was basically the sequel to Mario 1. There's Mario 2, we've talked about that on the show before. It's a whole nother thing. Where it just took exactly that formula and just was more and better. And, that's it, more and better, right?
Yeah.
And then Mario 64 is another type of sort of sequel, which reinvents a thing while keeping its sort of the core intact.
Right.
And I think that change from Mario World to Mario 64 is important to that franchise, because now every new Mario can be very different.
Yeah.
Because that's a part of the core of that franchise. And so sequels, in order to be the same, it has to be different, right? And so I think that's they get to have their cake and eat it too a little bit. They get to call back to the old, and they get to try something like totally new and different. They get to break things. They don't have to include every feature. Like that's the goal all franchises hope to, is to be able to have that freedom to do, and also be as good as that, I suppose.
Yeah.
Martha, you brought up Riven.
Yay!
As a famous sequel. What's so great about Riven?
It's a sequel to Myst, and it was, they had like updated graphics, and like the story just expanded to be really cool and interesting, and you learned all this backstory about like who this family was, and like what's going on, and how the mechanics of these worlds work, and stuff like that. And it was like, it was awesome.
Yeah, Myst was a story. Riven was a world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you got to explore, and like they didn't hand you stuff. It was like, it was cool.
Yeah.
And there were so many discs. So many.
Oh, right, because that game did come out on DVD, but it was on like 7 CDs or something in its first launch.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the version I had.
Yeah.
Where every time you would go to a new island or whatever, it would be like, please insert disc 5.
Right, and because it was a sort of a free roaming game, you'd swap discs out all the time. You'd do like 2 and 5 and 4 and whatever.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, because it was whatever content that was.
Goodness.
Like either, I wonder if each disc had the core game engine on it, or did that just lived in memory when you launched it? I'm super curious about the
I
technical
don't know.
aspects of that.
Yeah, now I really want to know.
So another really good one that's like that is Portal 2, where it really opened up the world and became a bigger thing. Portal was was a surprise hit. Like every Valve success has just been on accident, and this is totally one of them. And
I don't disagree.
where they're like they was a university student, I think, came with this concept for Portal. It had a different name at the time.
Yeah.
The mechanic was interesting. Valve hired that person, and then worked on Kim Swift, is her name, I think. And you guys someone can fact check me on that. And they worked on this game, and they sort of like kind of put it in the Half-Life universe. There was like some hints in the first Portal of that, because again, Valve doesn't want to come up with new ideas all the time. And so they just like, well, what are we going to do with this? Well, we'll put it out for a couple bucks on PC, and then like we'll put it as like product 7 in this compilation disc of older titles called the Orange Box, which was on Xbox and PlayStation 3. And the Portal was the standout of that. Like this was had a sequel to Half-Life on it, and people were more excited about Portal. Like that's how big a deal that was.
Yeah.
And so the sequel was just like, everyone was just chomping at the bit for the sequel. I remember when Gabe Newell at E3 was on Sony's stage and announced Portal 2 coming to PlayStation, and that Portal 2 would be best on PlayStation, which is a weird marketing thing.
Yeah.
But like, I remember what a big deal that was, like, because people really like Gabe Newell had said a bunch of terrible things about PlayStation like 6 months earlier or something, like, because whatever.
Yeah.
But like
Drama.
Yeah. So like PlayStation 3 was like the lead platform, at least from the marketing standpoint, it was sort of the lead for that. And you could sync your Steam account to your PlayStation account. Like, so I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but like that Portal 2 was a huge deal. But it's been so long since then that we forget, other than the game itself, we sort of forget all the stuff surrounding it was really interesting. And like only a sequel could do that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
like a new IP from a famed developer could maybe do that. Like I know like Bethesda has this new space sci-fi themed game that's going to be out in a couple of years
that no one knows anything about.
Right, and people are excited about it because it's from Bethesda, and that is, you know, you could almost argue that it's as much a sequel as anything else because for those, at least in that aspect.
Sure.
But a lot of times sequels allow companies to do more than just release a product. They can like change how the release models work, or like Half-Life 2 is how Steam launched. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Or I don't think it was the first Half-Life. It was Half-Life 2 because people were like, the only way they could play it was on Steam, and so they had to download Steam. Yeah. And so people hated that at the time. Mm-hmm. But that's another example, Half-Life 2, a big sequel that was just bigger and better.
Yeah. I like what you brought up about like that sequel thing because like making a sequel is sort of a safe option for AAA developers because like they know that if this game was popular in the past, that they can get those fans to probably buy this game again.
Yes.
And they might be able to do a few newer things with it or like expand upon it and make it bigger and whatever else. But like they know as a result of that they can do that because it's likely that the money will come back. Whereas making a new IP is scarier because like you don't know if people will buy this game or not unless it's similar to other games.
Yeah.
Other popular games or your previous work.
Yeah, that sort of sequels play it safe is like it's really a two-sided coin because like, and this is sort of true of movies as well. Like only Marvel movies can do something weird like release Guardians of the Galaxy and expect $1 billion.
Yeah.
Whereas a normal action franchise has to play it safe if they want to introduce a new IP to an audience. And that's true of games as well.
Yeah.
Like games that are long running and established have the freedom to experiment a little bit. Which isn't to say that they do that all the time.
That's true.
Case in point, like Call of Duty, which has gone back and forth between like something new and interesting that people think, oh, they're finally doing something new and interesting, and then this is exactly the same as the last year. It will sell great.
Right.
Like,
yeah, people want the new Call of Duties to be different and fun and exciting, but also the exact same and nothing much changed and stuff.
That's word for word my critique of Smash.
Yeah, well,
that's another great example. Melee was a sequel to the original Smash Brothers, and as far as I understand, the original Smash Brothers was not a hit.
It wasn't huge. It was like successful enough.
Yeah, it was like it didn't sell as well as Mario Kart or whatever. I guess even Smash now still doesn't, but it wasn't like the biggest thing on there. The novelty of all the characters being together was the big sell of that. But the gameplay of Melee is what has led that series to preserve. I mean, as much as all the Nintendo fanboyism has kept a lot of that franchise alive, it's the core like fighting game mechanics, unique mechanics of it that is really what its fans like about it.
What Melee's fans specifically like about it.
That's true.
Like there are Melee, there are Melee fans, and then there are everyone else Smash fans.
Yeah.
Melee fans are the ones, this is why they're still making GameCube controllers for the Switch and making it functional for it, is because Melee fans need it to be Melee, basically.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating.
Side note on that, they're doing it again this time with Smash Ultimate. It's like, I know. It's like, oh, and there'll be GameCube controller support. It's like, why?
Because GameCube controllers are good.
I mean,
they're not bad.
Yeah, they're fine, but like they're not like the pinnacle of design.
Agreed.
Anyway, but especially that D-pad. It's the only D-pad Nintendo ever made that sucks.
Well, nothing gets worse than Xbox 360 D-pad. So.
The GameCube one's pretty bad.
It's anyway. Not great.
But the thing that gets me about it is that they're doing it in such like a half-hearted way. They made this like a dongle thing. You have to plug into 2 USB ports, and then it will do 4 GameCube ports, and then you plug a regular GameCube controller in it. It's been 18 years. Just make a USB GameCube controller.
Right?
Like, what is the problem?
Right.
Come on, Nintendo. That feels like it would be easier.
An alternative is just don't make GameCube controllers.
Well, there's
Move
that
on
also.
with your lives. This has been Stephen's Smash Corner.
Yeah. What are we talking about again?
Sequels. Speaking of fighting game sequels, I do want to mention that Street Fighter 2 is like the definitive fighting game because like it actually brought combos and a lot of the modern fighting game things into the world.
Speaking of the language of games, that is where a lot of that was formed.
Definitely.
Yeah, because the first Street Fighter is, I mean, you describe it to me? I've seen. I keep forgetting what this deal was.
It's kind of like Street Fighter 2 without any of the combos and interesting stuff, but also you play as Ryu and Ken, and they're like the same character.
Yeah.
So like you're just basically fighting.
It's those two characters, 1-on-1.
Yeah.
It's just, but
and that's it.
with almost none of the mechanics of a fighting game.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Another one, Ms. Pac-Man.
Yeah.
Is a really famous arcade one from long ago, where there's a great story, and rather than recount it all, we can maybe do a link. There was a great GDC postmortem, but also this story's been written up from time to time, where Pac-Man was so popular, and so there were a lot of unauthorized ROM hacks, basically, in pizza parlors all across America. It was a pretty common cottage industry for like hobby shop developer companies to take these boards, make their own versions of these games that would have more features and stuff. And there was a company that did this for Pac-Man, and it was really popular. And Namco just said, hey, can we just buy it from you and release it as the sequel?
Yeah.
And that's essentially what they did. And that's what Ms. Pac-Man is. So if you, I mean, really, you can't find the original Pac-Man in most places because Ms. Pac-Man was an even bigger hit. And that is the definitive Pac-Man experience. Well, as far as I understand, I'm sure there's people who have other opinions on that subject, but I find that's a great story. I love that one.
Yeah, we'll link to something.
But again, it's iteration, and that's the key to software development is iteration, and so it's sort of why sequels kind of work. You know,
Yeah, like Borderlands 2 being much better than Borderlands 1.
Yes, you insisted this go on the list.
Yes.
So tell me all about it.
Well, it's because I played them in backwards order. So I played the third one first and then the second one. And then I tried playing the first one. And I was like, oh my God, how did this become popular? Because in the first one, like they didn't have hardly any voice acting and they didn't have like a map. Like, they had a map if you went into the menu, but they didn't have like a HUD map. They just had a compass that would have like points on it that
Sounds like Steven would like that game.
You know, I got into the first Borderlands more than Borderlands 2. So, yeah, kind of.
Get out.
Kicked out of the clubhouse.
Bye, everyone.
Just kidding. But yeah, in Borderlands 2, they changed around a bunch of how the UI worked, and they added the map, and the story was like fully fleshed out, and they had fully voice acted lines for everybody, and it was improved upon everything that they did.
Yeah, more and better.
Yeah.
Right, which is like that's a thing that sounds really simple, but it's like a big deal.
Yeah.
So maybe let's talk about some of the really bad ones. So along a sort of a twist on what we said before, like Martha, you were talking about Myst 5?
Yes.
Yeah?
Oh, it was terrible. I didn't finish it.
Oh, okay.
I only played the first part because they got rid so I know you really liked Uru, and Uru was fun, but I didn't really consider it a Myst game because it didn't have live actors in it.
Right.
And that's what they did with the fifth one, is they used the same thing that they did for Uru.
Right. It was a first-person adventure game. It wasn't node-based. It had very little of the Myst formula.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it didn't really feel like a Myst game. And so I rejected it.
Yeah, it also took place in the Uru setting because, like, fun behind-the-scenes story, Myst 5. So Uru was a spin-off that was meant to be an MMO in the world of Myst, but then Ubisoft didn't give it enough money, and so they released it as a single-player adventure that was basically Myst, but instead of taking place in the crazy world, you started out on Earth and explored. So it was sort of a Myst game, but because it was envisioned as something else, it didn't really catch on with Myst fans, but it had its own fan base, and it was really core to the lore of Myst in a way that when Myst 5 came out, which was supposed to be an expansion to Uru, but then wasn't because money again. Because Cyan has a really interesting history about like big ambitious projects that get cut down and then still being able to ship something anyway. So kudos to them, but like it's really, you wonder what could have been. But yeah, Myst 5, it was sort of a sequel to Uru more than it was a sequel to Myst. And Myst 3 and 4 were not developed by Cyan because Cyan was busy making Uru. And so they're great games. I think we were talking about before. Like,
yeah, I really liked all, like 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, they really are all great because the story is really good, and that's the main draw of those games. Although, I mean, the puzzles, of course.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, Myst 5 is just an Uru game, pretty much. And it has a lot of the same characters. It has this interesting epilogue that feels a little tacked on to like tie it back to Atris and all those characters and stuff. But I loved it because I loved Uru so much. So that was for me. Like,
Well, I'm glad.
but it's definitely a case of a sequel being more similar to like a film or book sequel, in that the story is the main part of it, and it really is determined whether you like it or not.
Right.
And it didn't really hit with you because it felt like a side story to you. The perspective wasn't right. Like, not just of the gameplay, but the perspective of the story wasn't quite the same, and it had a different milieu. Like, it was just not the same. It wasn't a Myst game, right?
Yeah.
In that sense. And to me, it worked for me because it was something I was familiar with and liked, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it all has to do with your expectations too.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of these things, when you come into them and you're expecting them to be a certain way and then they're not that way, you can either, like, if you end up liking it, then it'll be cool. But if it's just not right, not exactly what you wanted, you can feel disappointed.
Yeah. That's kind of the reason why I'm going to sound real hypocritical because I'm extremely hyped for Smash Ultimate and Soul Calibur 6, but like, I kind of don't like sequels in a way.
Yeah.
Because because
waiting for you to make this work.
Yeah. Well, my issue with it is because like the game that came out already, it exists, and like what people want from sequels is just more of the same thing.
Yeah.
But just more of it, in which, especially nowadays, like, we can release DLC and patch things and add more junk and whatever else. It's like way easier to get more of whatever game you really like.
Yeah.
You don't need a sequel for it.
Right.
As often. But as a game developer, I think what I want from a sequel is I want a better version of this game I just made. And that might mean taking out some of the features that were extraneous or tightening up some of the features that are in the game already to make it even better or something like that. And oftentimes fans will like chew you out for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that frustrates me a lot of the time because like they want to make the game better and maybe that wasn't the direction that you expected it to be, but like that's what they wanted to do as game developers.
Yeah.
But like at the same time also like you're paying for this game and it's not what you expected. So like it makes sense that like you would be disappointed if it was like this way.
Right. Like, like a roller coaster is fun, but if you paid to go on the water slide.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's kind of like that. It's kind of like that. It's, yeah.
You touch on this sort of the difference between like a new product and an improving product. And that's certainly the case. Like, you have the annualized sequels, you have your Call of Duties, your Maddens, your Assassin's Creeds, but then you also have your games as a service.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of there, you have something like Destiny.
Oh.
Which has a sequel, but also has constantly evolves, weekly patches. But then when the sequel comes around, you don't carry your progress over. It's not an MMO. Now, Martha, you're a Destiny player.
Yeah.
So, like,
well, actually, I'm just a Destiny 2 player.
Oh, really?
I never played I watched Dylan play the first one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that Destiny 2 was a lot more it feels more alive than Destiny 1 felt. Mostly because I think when Destiny 1 came out, they didn't really have everything set up in it yet, and they had the wrong voice actor, and just made everything weird.
Yeah.
And then, like, I hear, like, Polygon people talking a lot about how they made a DLC for the first one called Taken King, and how that, like, saved the game and made it fun for everybody, because it added all these features in that were really awesome and made it, like, really fun. And it had an actual story instead of being like, the darkness versus the light. That's what they're called, the bad and the good. And I'm the speaker and you're the guardian of the light against the darkness. Are you engaged yet?
Yes.
But yeah, I like the sequel.
Yeah. That franchise, when it was announced, like, it's going to be a huge 10-year project that Activision paying a lot of money for. And I think they talked very openly about how, like, that DLC you're talking about that sort of fixed the game, about how, like, it was always meant to evolve as it went. Yeah. And so that's why it's weird, because there's no subscription model. You just pay for it. The DLC is there's cosmetic items. So there's a business model in place to keep that development going. But like, the idea of doing a sequel instead of just continually adding on to it, that must have been like a tough call.
Yeah.
I mean, like, how is the lifetime of this franchise going to work?
Yeah. Well, like, if the game is, if this the thing you're trying to add to this game is so much different from the original game that it doesn't make sense to like just add on to it.
Yeah.
It makes sense to just make a new game. Like this happens in fighting games, especially more recently, because like their fighting games have patches all the time.
Yeah.
But there's Street Fighter 4 and Ultimate Street Fighter 4 and Ultimate. No, is it Ultimate? It's Super Street Fighter 4 and then Super Street Fighter 4 2016 edition and then
There's Ultra, right?
there's Ultra Street Fighter 4. Yeah, there's there's a bunch of different.
But
Street Fighter
can't
4s
they
and
just
also
get away with
patches.
that because there's a history of that kind of?
I mean, there is, but the
Like-
reason there's a history of it because like they didn't have patches back in the day, so
Right,
they
but
had
now,
to make new.
but now that they do they need that?
Well, I think there's some differences between the different ones that like. I'm not a Street Fighter player, so I don't know all the differences. But I know there are some differences. Some like they changed some of the mechanics and stuff, and it's not just literally a patch, and
Yeah.
they're selling it to you for $40.
Right.
There's more to it than that, but like I don't know how much of it there is. But like that's an example of it. If they change a lot of the systems to the point where like it feels like a different game, then that's why they would make a sequel. At least that's what my thinking.
Sure.
That's my
sure.
understanding of it is.
Yeah.
Plus, usually sequels are big, like they're longer than a patch or like a DLC campaign would be.
Right.
Like but a lot of the Destiny 2 and Destiny 1 like DLC campaigns were like maybe a fourth of the regular game
Okay.
length long. So yeah.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's like a node in the tree. So like you have the first one and then have DLC as little branches coming off of it, and then the next one is like another node that branches will come off of, if that's how I think of it.
Oh, sure. That makes sense. Yeah. And I suppose without a subscription model, eventually you can't keep charging $10 or whatever for like new content. You want to do a big thing and charge real money for it.
Yeah.
You know.
That's true too.
So that's interesting. The players have responded differently. Some are like perfectly fine. Others like, I don't want to lose this progress of this character. It's like a corrupted save, kind of, right? Like,
Yeah.
Steven, you wanted to talk about spiritual sequels as well?
Oh yeah, I wanted to bring that up just because like there are some games that are like they're like refined versions of older games.
Yeah.
But they do everything better and they just release it as basically a new game that is not a sequel to a previous thing.
Right.
Like if you like this thing, you'll like this one too.
Right. And that can happen with the same developer can release a new version with like mechanics that are similar to a previous game.
Yeah.
It can happen for a game. It can be a spiritual to something long ago that they had nothing to do with. Or it could be that a franchise changed ownership.
Yes.
And so the title, the characters had to change.
Yeah,
Something like that.
that's also true.
It's happened. There's a bunch of examples, right?
Well, my favorite example of this is Rocket League. It was based off of the game where we it's called Supersonic Acrobatic Rocket Powered Battle Cars. Super long. That's the original one. But they like refined the game and stuff. They released it on Xbox 360 and then like it was with middling success. But like they had a decent enough of a fan base and they kept playing the game and stuff and they requested things and the developers wanted to keep adding stuff and refine stuff and things. And then they eventually like just refined it to the point where they were like, we should just make this a new game again and re-release it as Rocket League. And then they did it and then boom, it was explosively popular.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And then they also had a big change in their marketing and approach.
Yes.
Like, I mean, Rocket League is very sports themed.
Yeah.
And so they decided to make the fields of play a lot simpler.
Yeah.
Like I think in the previous one, it was much more like
they had some
like
wild
fun ramps and funhouse stuff. And they decided to make it more digestible almost.
And I think a lot of the fans back in the day they either like showed they didn't like it because they didn't play on them very much, or like they actively said like I don't like this thing. And they like as the developers were like, we probably shouldn't have these in there because they're just not popular and people aren't gonna play them. But also like they changed their name from a 6-worded title to a 2-word title.
Yeah.
And that's a lot easier for people.
Yeah.
Right. So
Well, I mean, I think that branding change is really important because I think it informs future decisions about it. Like it went from, I mean, that other name is the most adult swimmiest thing I've ever heard. And then they went from that into this like esports kind of aesthetic.
Yeah.
And so that informs the development. It informs the type of people who will be interested in it. And it can be this symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
And so that's a big important part of building a franchise is all the pieces of it, not just like improving the mechanics from piece to piece. What turns it from a series of games to something bigger like that, I think, is that those connections.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, but I guess I just wanted to bring that up as a side thing. 'Cause
Yeah.
sometimes you want to make a sequel, but you don't want to, because like it might be a sequel to a game that was not well received either. And
hey, there's an example of that, which is my game Metro Nexus, which is a spiritual successor to City Connection,
right? Which
I've listeners who've heard me talk about it before have heard it many times before. But that was a game that was not well received. It has maybe a bit of a cult following. I don't know, but it was just one of the games I played as a kid, and I thought everyone else did too. And I'm like, but it's not great. I can do better. And so that's the story of that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's fun because when I started working on Metro Nexus, it was very much like I don't know what I want to make. But it was more like, let's see how I'll demo this mechanic I remember from long ago. And I actually didn't own a copy of the game. It was just all from my memory of the game. Thinking like, I can do this better. And so just doing it from scratch, but with the same kind of like core idea of it is nice. And when I play test it and someone goes, oh, this is like a better version of City Connection, I'm just like, yes, someone figured it out.
I did it.
But the thing about spiritual sequels that is important is that you don't have to surface that information. Yeah. Because that's what makes it different from not just the different IP or sometimes different developer or whatever, or different provenance, but like it's not trading on the previous one in an effort to promote that one, right? It's just it is spiritual and that's all it is.
Right.
Another example is Elite Dangerous, which is a spiritual successor to Elite, which was like one of the first like 3D space things, but was still in like pixely graphics. Yeah. So it was like very hard. Like I've seen screenshots of it and it was like, well, how could you tell where you like are or whatever? But yeah, they took that idea and made this, huge sprawling space exploration game out of it.
Nice.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, maybe we can probably maybe look up and see if there's got to be a list of these on the internet. So we'll see if we can find a link or two. Because there's always some surprises. Like you're like, oh, I didn't know that. And then you look into the old one and you're like, oh, that's so cool. Stuff like that. So let's end this topic with ambitions for you guys. What sequels would you want to make, either to, like in my case, a spiritual sequel, or like a game you're working on that you can imagine what the third or fourth one, like Pie in the Sky. What do you hope you have? Like, what does Vengeance 3 look like?
3? You got to finish the first one
Let's
first.
We don't have to focus on that at all.
It's already out, right? Future Steven knows.
Yeah, Vengeance 2 has got some pretty good reviews. Yeah. It's been out for a year or two. Yeah. It's time to work on the third one.
Yes.
What does that look like?
I guess I've imagined Vengeance 2 being a twin-stick shooter. Yeah. Where like it's more like an open world exploration-y shooter thing, but like there are encounters. It's more roguelike than the way it is now.
Okay.
Which I would appreciate. So Vengeance 3 would probably just be a refinement of that.
Yeah.
Maybe they take it to space.
Fish in space. That's good, because a lot of that is ideas you guys had in the development of Vengeance that you just kept in your back pocket.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's a cool approach, right? And especially arcade games, old school retro games, their sequels tend to be very different, but have the sort of the heart of it intact. And that seems like the direction you'd be going.
Yeah, that's what I would like. I think that's what I would want for Vengeance 3.
Yeah.
More penguins. Definitely more penguins.
I feel similarly about if there's ever a Widget Satchel 2, is basically all the ideas we decided we didn't want to, that were just too out of scope. Like, climbing, wall jumping, stuff like that. Other platform mechanics I think would be really fun that we didn't have a place for and we didn't want to design for this time around. But we could make a game that feels totally different, but is still part of that world.
Yeah.
I would love to do something like that one day.
Yeah, like Commander Key gets a promotion, goes to a new station.
Yeah.
It's just bigger.
Yeah. It'd be an outpost on a planet or something.
Yeah, and you just get to break more stuff.
Yeah.
I love that.
Martha, do you have a whole world planned for your point and click adventure?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of sequels. Lots of different places, like to the beach or to space or in the forest.
Well, I mean, the cool thing about your game is like the characters are a lot of what like make it, right? So like you can just port them to different places, and then they have an adventure in a forest, and like that would be cool. Yeah, like they're having a new adventure in a forest. I'd sign up for that.
Right, you can make a card game version of it. You can make a platformer for it. You could do. Don't give me that look. You can, you could do it in different styles because the story is what's core to it. right? Although point and click is really your inspiration, certainly. But there's other places to take it, right? It'd be easier than you might not want to, but it's easier for a property like that than it would be for some other types of games where the mechanics is more core to it, to its like the heart of it.
Right. It'd be really weird to have a Fingens platformer, for example.
Would it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You just add springs to the bottom of the submarines.
Done.
Well, dang. That's Fingens 4.
There's a button for that in Unity, right?
Yeah. Just add springs.
Yeah.
You'd add gravity and all of the bullets fall to the ground.
Yeah. Fingens now is physics engine.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. For Metro Nexus, I don't ever intend to do a sequel to that game.
Mm-hmm.
I have some DLC plans, and that's kind of part of the core of it, is that you go to the world cities. So DLC would be different cities.
Yeah.
But I don't, in my wildest dreams, I don't imagine ever making another one. Weirdly.
I mean, sometimes... I like that instinct that like your game is just a complete thing and you don't want to make another one of those. I think that's good.
Yeah, and part of that is because it is itself a spiritual sequel.
Yeah.
That I feel like I don't have ambitions to do more than that. I feel like this is the refinement.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah.
Who the hell knows what'll happen, but like what it turn, maybe there'll be 3 of those and just one Widget Satchel. I don't know, but Widget Satchel is one where it feels more natural to me. Because it comes from a tradition of games that has sequels as well.
Yeah. That's our show. If you haven't already, subscribe to Nice Games Club in your favorite podcast app and be sure to give it a good review if you liked it or are nice like us. We really do need to know you're out there, so leave a review and tell all your friends too.
Hey, let me stop you there and just reiterate that for people because there's been a lot happening in the world of podcast apps.
Yes.
Google has a podcast app. Apple changed theirs to Apple Podcasts some time ago.
Okay.
So now's a good time to give your old pals at Nice Games Club a review in your favorite podcast app.
Yeah.
5 stars preferred. 6 if you can manage. All right, go on.
We're not picky. We also want to hear directly from you. So follow us on Twitter and all the other things at Nice Games Club. Lastly, you can find out more about the show and your nice host, as well as get all the links and show notes from this and other episodes at nicegames.club.
So until we start again, remember to
play nice
and make nice.